how can we look at sex in more of a way that is abundant and that's pleasure focused? And we're both, women of, I think, a similar age. I'm probably a little bit older than you, I think. But like, what would that look like if that were our story? And if like that was gifted to us and given to us in our education, like what could our sex lives look like? And maybe you've worked on some of this with your clients.
Yeah. I think a lot of it comes down to, and I have my clients journal a lot. They'll journal in session. I'll even take time where I'm like, hey, take 10 minutes. Let's just write on this, right? Um, and just allowing yourself to tap into that place. Like when I say sex, what comes up in your body? Right? Do you feel a tightness in your chest? Do you feel butterflies in your stomach? Do your hands get clammy? What goes on? Right? Like, let's just somatically track what's going on in my body because my brain doesn't tries to make sense of what's going on, but doesn't always understand it. Right? Like, we've got logic on one
Hmm.
side, we've got emotion on another area, and a lot of times they don't talk to each other. And if I can focus in, right? So let's use the tightness in the chest, right? If I can focus in on that area and maybe we do a guided meditation, maybe really bring ourselves into that present moment and I give that part of voice, right? I can reach in and externalize it. I can hold it in my hand. I can set it in a chair. I can vision myself in my chest with that part, whatever it is. And I start an open dialogue with it, right? What are you trying to tell me? When I feel this in my chest, how are you trying to keep me safe? What are you trying to communicate? And a lot of times, right, feelings it's kind of like, I've gotta walk the walk, not just talk the talk. And in
Hmm.
therapy, especially talk therapy, you're talking the talk. But if we bring people into their bodies, they're gonna recognize a time when like, "Oh, my body felt like this in another time," or "I learned this from this experience," right? And we can start to really deconstruct where some of these stories are coming from. And the fact that these parts can come up with only the intention to keep us safe, with only the intention to better our lives. But if these parts came on the scene when we were really young and had immature ways of, you know, kind of interacting with the world or finding a coping mechanism, it's not that that didn't work. It's just that we didn't have any other tools at the time to really pick from. And so we can start figuring out where these stories came from. And I can start to ask, does that feel true to you? Right? As you say that to me, as you start to repeat to me what this part is saying, does that ring to you as true, or does it just ring to you as something like, "Oh, I've told myself this for a really long time, but I don't know that it's actually mine." And then we can start okay, well, how do you know your body's feeling pleasure, right? Let's dive into that part. How would it be if we started associating some of our news stories with this pleasure story, right? With this somatic pleasure response? And can we start kind of bridging the mind and body to start working together on recreating this story? And then I think to touch on another part that you brought up, how can we work from this place of abundance instead of something's being taken away or this needs to be perfect or my sex life and my marriage has to look like this. Um, Really inviting in play. Like, when the fuck did sex have to get so serious, right? Like, to go back to that childhood, right? To go back to that wonder when we were kids and everything was sensory and everything was funny and everything, right? Like, as a kid, if I felt discomfort, I'd move into pleasure, right? I wasn't like, "Oh, I feel discomfort. I'm going to keep doing this thing even though it feels weird in my body." So there's nothing inherently wrong with pleasure until we start to define what the pleasure is supposed to look like or supposed to feel like or any of these things, right? We can just kind of follow it and play with it. Maybe we have a different definition of what it means for us.
Right. Oh my gosh, this is all so yummy, everything that you're saying. It's so true. We really make things, I think, speaking in general, but like I know I make things way too serious in my life and always stepping back into thinking about, well, what would like the kid version of me do leads me to the best place, right? Because as kids we are so pure, and I think as we grow up, we are taught we're narrative in nature as humans. We are just storytellers. That's like our age old way that we create legacy. And so we're always trying to create meaning out of something. Like, what does this mean? And I know that was pretty limiting for me. And when I first opened up my marriage, it was like, oh, well, what is this going to mean about me? What is this going to say about me? You know, we're talking a lot about bringing it back to childhood, right? Bringing things back to play rather than making them so serious. And I think, you know, for anybody who's listening, we all can agree that a lot of our trauma comes from childhood. And then that tends to play out in our relationships as we get older, in our most intimate relationships, usually these styles of attachment and relation come out. And so I know you work on this a lot with your clients, and we've never done a deep dive into attachment theory on the show. If you want to give a little overview of what they are and how people can work with them, that would be super helpful.
Yeah. So there's secure attachment, right? Which we're all striving for. If my person, my partner, my caretaker leaves, I have this knowingness inside that they'll come back, right? That I will have that safety in that reunion. Then there is anxious, which is more, insecure attachment, anxious attachment. And there's a lot of studies around this, but what I'll kind of bring in to give a visual to the listeners is they did research on attachment styles. And what they would do is they would have the caretaker in the room with the infant, with the toddler, the child, and they'd be playing, they'd be doing their thing, and then the caretaker would leave and the researchers would observe what happened when the caretaker left and then what happened upon that reunion. The secure kid, the caretaker left, they might have noticed it. They didn't like it too much, right? Their person's gone, their safety in the world is gone. Then the person came back and was like, oh, all is good in the world. I can keep playing and doing my thing, right? With the more anxiously attached kid, even the playing in the beginning, there's a lot of the best way to kind of explain it is the anxious kid thinks the world is very unsafe. And the world is unsafe. That's our job as parents, is to teach our children that the world is unsafe and that they're strong enough to face that world. And that if when it gets too unsafe, they can turn around and they always have our support and our love, right? But with the anxious kid, it's like everything is unsafe. So when they were playing, there's kind of some like looking to mom or dad or caretaker for approval, like, is this okay to play with? Um, and then when the caretaker would leave, it was just like the wheels came off, right? Like tantrums, the kid is crying. And then upon returning, instead of, right, with the securely attached kid that kind of comes back to homeostasis, this kid can almost not be consoled, right? Mom or dad or caretaker will be holding it. The kid's still crying. There's no real safety restored in the body. Then we get to avoidantly attached kids, right? They're like, here I am. I'm going to raise my hand. My name's Lindsay and I am a recovering avoidant. They are so in their own world, right? They're playing. They're probably not even checking to see if the caretaker is like watching them or doing, they're just like in their world, right? Caretaker leaves. It might piss them off a little bit. They're like, whatever, I'm still going to do what I'm doing. The caretaker comes back and the kid is like, okay, like what? Why are you trying to pick me up now? Right? Like, let me play with my choo-choos. So we've got, and then there's disorganized, which we don't see often. That's kind of when we fall into the space. When we see it manifest later, we see more like personality disorders and things. And the disorganized attached kid is just like, there's no safety. There's a desire to attach. The kid doesn't know how to attach. So you might see the kid, when the caretaker comes back crying and crawling, but like crawling backwards, there's just some kind of confusion, right? Like, you're not a very safe person, but I also want your love. But I also like, I'm so inside myself, almost that like schizoid place that all of my attachment is disorganized. So when we're talking about relationship attachment and this, kind of comes up more in couples therapy, the three that we're really working with are secure, anxious, and avoidant. What's interesting is that if we can keep in our heart and keep in our soul and our knowing that as humans, right, from an anthropological level, from an evolutionary state, we want to connect. We all do. It's what's propelled our species forward. There's a lot of, fear of being, if I'm not attached to this person, right? Like when we go back to kind of hunter gatherer society, I won't survive without this person. And so oftentimes, the anxious has a narrative that love, attachment, connection is something I need is pivotal because I think of kind of anxiously attached kids as the ones that had the helicopter parent that did everything for them. So now in my romantic partnership later in life, if you're not doing everything, if you're not applauding or validating everything I'm doing, am I, is it, am I doing it? Are we still in love? Are you still going to be here? If you leave, can you text me all the time so I know you're coming back? Right? There's this very anxious vibe to it. The avoidant, even though, and this is me again talking from my own experience and from,
Yeah. I'm a classic avoidant also.
well, I was someone that was like, fuck you, I'm going to leave before I can get left. Right? We go back to our attachments. My mom was an addict. So I didn't have that safe place to rest. Sometimes I did, but not often enough. There wasn't that good enough parenting to let me know that I had a soft place to land. So I was like,
Mm,
well, the world is dangerous, but if I'm more dangerous, it won't fuck with me, right?
yeah.
Like I'm going to just kind of take it as I can. And so at the core of that though, right? I'm still on a genetic level programmed to want to connect to people. And it
Mhm.
feels really fucking scary to do that when my narrative is like that, well, they're going to leave, right? So why would I set myself up to be hurt if the partner is going to leave? And so lo and behold, how great would it be for an avoidant person to match up with an anxious person that tells me all the time how much they won't leave and how much they love me and all of these different things, right? So then they come into couples therapy because he or she wants nothing to do with me and he or she wants everything to do with me and we can't fucking figure it out. Well, it's like, well,
Mhm.
of course that's what happened because you confirmed each other's bias about love and who you needed to pair up with to make sure that you didn't ever have to change your narrative. You never had to take a critical look at, is this my story? And so when we get into couples therapy, identifying the attachment style and identifying how are we going to find communication skills that don't trigger you to leave or me to get anxious, and can we start working with each other to work towards more secure attachment? And obviously that just like accentuates tenfold when we start bringing sex into it.